Toonami Studios.
Commanders in Crisis. This is the latest book to come from Steve Orlando, a guy who has been crushing it lately. I don't think he's had any projects that I've disliked. There's been some that I think were different, but he's a good writer. I'm very curious to see how his stories play out. So he's got an indie book at Image Comics, Commanders in Crisis. Sounds like the title alone, you put Crisis in there, you think you're going to get a deep developed superhero story that's going to be kind of a world-ending event, and you get that here a lot. I like how this book opens up. We get a forward from Dan DiDio, which I'm like, that's awesome. He's talking about how Steve loves comics and how Commanders in Crisis is a comic book event in the sprawling pages of a new series of characters you can fall in love with and start to really enjoy reading. That's kind of a cool way to start this book. And before we get started, I will say this. I enjoyed this a lot. I think the artwork from David Tinto is gorgeous. It's some of the cleanest artwork out there. I think it's some of my favorite of the year, honestly. And this was really interesting and really intriguing. I don't think it was perfect. I think sometimes it was a little too in over its own head. But hey, I'm excited to read this going forward. I think the characters are interesting and cool. So let's get into it. We open up and there is this dead body in this place in Pennsylvania. The cops come in and they survey it. The guy's a John Doe. Nobody really knows who he is. And we're just kind of like, well, we'll get the people in here, do the autopsy, get the body out, pull it back to the morgue, all that stuff. And as they're leaving, one of the cops stays behind, and it looks like he's taking something off the body, you know? So we're not really sure what it is, so it's kind of adding to the mystery idea of that. And I think that's pretty fascinating. The artwork, again, it looks gorgeous in these scenes. And then we get to this, I guess you could say like a Senate hearing. I'm not really familiar with American politics, but there's this hearing, and this loudmouthed guy is talking about how America needs to reestablish itself and become the best country again. And the only way to do that, or one of the only ways to do that, is 52 nations under the same roof, like just sovereign nations all connected to America, so there's no threats that could come and like divide the country. And I'm like, that is a weird angle to play. Something tells me this is going to come back in spades when it comes to the whole Crisis event that could be in this book. So that could be a really interesting angle. It doesn't really show up because we spend the rest of the book with our Crisis commanders. And I'm like, these guys are really cool. I like them a lot. So we first meet Frontier. She is kind of the behind-the-scenes tech operation, you know, the Oracle type figure. She stays behind, and they're talking to the, what did they call them? The Minute Muggers or something. They're these, I guess, time-displaced criminals that take time and energy, and they're fighting them. And this is where we meet all of our Commanders in Crisis people, you know? We got Prize Fighter, we got Seer, we got the Organizer, and we got Sawbones. And those are some pretty cool names. I really enjoy them. You know, they pretty much easily stop the fight. Seer uses this weird quantum power, which I'm thinking because it comes back later in the book, it's kind of connected to this idea that you can see their lives and you like kind of like pull from their lives and do these certain things and see certain events in a way. And it's a way to stop them. Organizer has this power where she can kind of like say stuff, and then that happens in reality. And of course, Prize Fighter is your Superman analog character. There's always one of them. There has to be. There's going to be. But I was really actually amazed by Sawbones because he's kind of like this med field doctor, and he knows the exact thing to hit to make you break, like specific to your person. It's very Sherlock Holmes in that way, and I was like, that is cool. That guy is sick. I really like that a lot. So they take down the muggers pretty easily. Seer is like drained a lot from her power. And of course, we get some really cool indication as to some of their powers. One of them being Prize Fighter. He needs to have kind of, I guess, like an audience or a public watching him as he's doing these events to keep up his power. So he goes to help these people trapped in a fire, saves a firefighter, kisses the firefighter, getting all this attention, and you're like, that's pretty cool. Again, the artwork really benefits from this. Steve Orlando really benefits from this. Everything looks great. And it was just so cool to see. Then we get a couple individual moments of our members of the Crisis Commanders. You know, we see like Organizer, I think, is that her name? I can't remember now. I'm literally had the tab up here with my notes for it, but I closed it, I don't know why. And I'm just like, she's talking to her friend, and her friend's just like, you know, I'm this good writer, I just can't find the inspiration right now. And then Organizer's just like, well, you know, I could help you with that. I could just change reality so it happens for you, but I can't tell you what you're going to write. I can just give you the inspiration for it. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. I like that angle a lot, so we do that. Sawbones goes to this hospital where this guy's heart has, or is it, I think it's his lungs actually. His lungs has this hole in it and starts puncturing. So he tells the doctors and nurses what they're supposed to do to save him. Just kind of like, hey, I'm not a doctor, man. I just know bodies. I'm like, that's okay. I think that's fun, really interesting stuff. And of course, we go see her. She's in like their base, and she's in her room, and she is picturing the events that she saw when she had her quantum moment where she saw those muggers. But there's this image that keeps popping up of a dodo bird, and I think that's pretty interesting because we learn on later about she's a remnant of a different like planet, well, not planet, just like a different Earth, and the dodo bird's extinct, so it could be like the last dodo bird of the species, how she's like the last remnants of that planet. So I think that's kind of cool, just an interesting angle to throw in there. And then we go back to Frontier. I think she's kind of like the lead of this book, or not like the main member of the Commanders in Crisis we're following. I think that's who she's supposed to be. And she's kind of just like minority reporting, looking at all this information, like, oh, what are we going to do here? How can we save these people? What's going on here? And she notices this autopsy that comes through the police department in Pennsylvania. And the evidence, or like just like the body has this matching signature to something that happened in the past life in like this before time. And I'm like, that okay. Now we're seeing how the body at the beginning of the book connects to the rest of the book. You're setting up a pretty cool story here. I'm intrigued. I'm very curious what's going forward. So then she rallies the team together. And this is where we get, I think, the coolest part of the book. And that is we learn a little bit about our Crisis Commanders and where they come from. So there is a multiverse out there. Of course there is. What Crisis doesn't have a multiverse in some regard? For a lack, I mean, come on, of course it does, right? And all of our people on the Crisis Commanders were former presidents of different Earths. Prizefighter was the first gay president. Seer was the first female president who was African American. Sawbones was the first Latinx president, you know? Organizer was the first Pakistani president, and even Frontier herself was the first female president on her Earth. So her Earth is, I guess, kind of the main Earth, or it's like the last one in the system. And that's why I think she's going to be the lead of this. She kind of like brought all these people together to help understand what's going on. And I'm like, that's kind of fun. I like that we brought them back. The fact that they're presidents is very comic booky to me. I don't know why. I just like that a lot. Like, oh, they're all presidents. They have an idea of leading a nation and leading people, which might come into play when we see like the 52 nations being built in America. I wonder how that's going to work. But then she brings up the body and she's just like, well, this matches a signature we've seen beyond reality. Like the thing that binds reality, the signature matches that. We're looking at the literal assassination of empathy. And I'm like, whoa, those are some deep themes I wasn't expecting for this book, but I'll take them. I mean, I thought this was going to be like, worlds are dying constantly, everything's in crisis, everyone's dying, planets are being destroyed. But we're just like, nope, the planets are already destroyed. Here we are just goofing around now, seeing the weird powers that all of our people have. And now there's this idea that empathy is dead, so you can't connect to people anymore. How is that going to connect to the Commanders? And how is that going to connect to the 52 nations that could be built? Also, I know it's America and those are the states, but 52 is such a DC Comics number that I'm just really happy that he threw it in there too. This feels like a great homage to some classic DC Comics, and I really did like that. I think it feels very multiversity at times. It feels very New 52-y in just some of the ways it introduces its characters, and all of the characters are really cool. There's nothing I could say about this book that isn't negative. I do think sometimes it's in over its own head in terms of the characters' powers and understanding, but it balances out with some amazing art and some fantastic writing. You could tell there's some real passion behind this, which I really enjoy seeing when it comes to something like this, and I'm glad it's an indie book as opposed to making it like a multiversity book where you could have characters in DC Pantheon. It feels better that it's just characters we never met before. Add something special to it. So, Commanders in Crisis, I am going to give a 7 out of 10. And thank you guys so much for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, all that good stuff, and I will catch you in the next one. Have fun, stay safe, good luck.